morning. We'll call today's meeting to order. I'll ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. With that, let me note for the record, there's a copy of the Open Meetings Act located on the north wall of the legislative chambers. For those, for any reason we may need it, there's an automatic defibrillator located in the back wall here of the chambers. And also, I ask if you have a cell phone, will you please silence it, mute it, or turn it on, turn it off. With that, we will call to order the Board of Equalization. Mr. Clerk. Board of Equalization.
Commissioner Borgeson? Here. Commissioner Boyle? Here. Commissioner Kavanaugh? Here. Commissioner Duda? Here. Commissioner Kraft? Here. Commissioner Morgan? Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, August 27, 2019. Item B is called for a meeting and set Tuesday, September 17, 2019 as the day for hearing on certified assessments and corrections. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, second by Commissioner Duda. Please vote.
Commissioner Boyle's vote will not appear due to technical difficulties, but he votes yes, as do the rest of the commissioners. Motion passes.
Item C is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Equalization related items not listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Seeing none, we'll go to the resolutions. We have items D, E, F, and G. What's the will of the board? Commissioner Ward? Okay. Is there a motion to approve items D, E, F, and G? So moved. Motion by Commissioner Duda. Second by Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Boyle.
Well, looking at item F is a denial of, and I'm always bothered by these artificial deadlines that prevent recognized nonprofits. This one denies a tax exemption to the Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands, and it's for a Toyota. And I don't know, I know there's deadlines, but we need to start talking about this with the legislature. I just don't think this is fair. This is an organization that contributes a great deal to our community, and frankly, I think its nonprofit status rises above any artificial deadline that's given to it by the state. And so I would make a motion that we grant the exemption to the Boys and Girls Club of Omaha for their Toyota car.
Let's pull that out first. So
Pardon me?
can we amend it to remove F from the motion?
I thought we did.
No, it's all in.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, can you
Okay.
change? Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I may make a note on item G, there's a bus for the Eastern Nebraska Community Action Partnership, which I'm a board member of.
I
Okay.
missed that.
He just noted, so that he's a board member of an organization that's there. So
Oh, I see.
what we're doing with the changes is going to approve items D, E, and G, and take F separately.
Right, thank you.
You ready, Mr. Clerk?
Yes. All right.
Please vote.
This is on F?
No, this is
D,
on.
E, and G.
I vote yes.
Mr. Commissioner Boyle, you want to make your motion on F?
Yes, I do.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. I'd make a motion that we grant the exemption to for the vehicle, the Toyota, to Boys and Girls Clubs of the Midlands.
That's a motion by Commissioner Boyle, a second by Commissioner Kraft.
One moment, please.
Okay, thank you.
Please vote. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Borgeson.
I just wanted to double check with our county attorney that, do these statutes have the same as the other ones as far as the denial process for these?
Teresa, your county attorney's office. Are you asking me if they have a right to appeal?
Yeah.
They do.
They do have a right?
They do.
To the state, right?
I believe they go, is it to Turk? Do they go to Turk? Yeah, they go to Turk.
Okay,
It sounds unusual for a motor vehicle, but that is accurate.
okay,
They do have an appellate process.
okay, thank you.
You good?
Yes, thank you.
Please vote. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Cowell.
I just asked Commissioner Boyle for a brief synopsis of why we're asked to do this.
Well, the reason I bring it up, and I brought it up on homestead exemptions before, and other items for nonprofits particularly things like churches that have changed, small churches that have change in the secretary and so forth that miss deadlines. To me, the status of a nonprofit to me, is a very high and noble and important classification in our society. And I think we need to honor the work that they do. And so some artificial deadline that says you don't get the benefit of a tax exemption because you missed a deadline should not be a bar to them receiving the benefit of their contribution to our society. To me, it's unfair to not to give these exemptions to these nonprofit groups who do such good work in our community. So I do this, I bring these up on churches, and I do it on nonprofits, and that's why I think the status of being a nonprofit is several rings and rungs above this deadline that's artificially placed by the state.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please vote on F.
I vote grant it.
Okay. Motion passes. Commissioner Duda voting no, other commissioners voting yes.
We'll go to appeals. Item I is appeal of the rejection of the homestead exemption for Elmer Bruce Wallingham at 2412 South 123rd Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68144. Mr. Goodwillie.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds Office. This is not the first time this one has been in front of you. This has a history. In 2017, we received an application for Mr. Wallahan filed by his daughter Sharon that represented that he lived in the dwelling for which homestead was sought. We had gotten calls from neighbors to indicate that he hadn't lived there in some time, and we went back and determined for certain that he had been full-time in nursing care since 2013, and also found out from the medical director at his current nursing home that he is incapable of living in the dwelling. So we sent out a denial. There was no protest that year. Ms. Wallahan reapplied for homestead in 2018, this time indicating that while her dad didn't live in the home any longer, that he intended to return. We double-checked, though, and found out from the medical director at the facility that he still was incapable of living in the house. And our belief was that at 102 and living in a nursing home for many years and incapable of living in the home, he did not meet the owner occupancy requirement of homestead. That's the bottom line. It's aimed at owner occupants. So then this year, we denied the application. It went to the county board. The board upheld the denial. Then this year, we got an application for 2019. And in this application, Ms. Wallahan indicated her dad does not live in the home, lives in a nursing home, but visits the home periodically. Well, that's not the test. That's not the same as owner occupancy. Mr. Wallahan is still a full-time resident of a nursing home, still incapable of living at home, and so we once again sent out a denial, and it's that denial from which the protest stems. I think this must be Ms. Wallahan. And so I think the crux of the protest was that she talked to a bunch of people, and they said they thought her dad ought to have homestead. That's not the test either. So in case she wants to address the board, I'll step aside for a moment. Sure.
Chair, could I ask that,
Oh, well, let me let her
you
make
want to
her
ask her?
statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to make a motion to support the assessor and deny it. We've read all this material, and
Okay.
we're familiar with the case.
Got a motion?
Yes, a motion?
Is there a second? Okay, ma'am, you can still make your.
Well, my dad is a World War II combat engineer that got deep brain damage, so it's 100% disability from that. The damage was subclinical for most of his life. But he will be spending a lot of time at the home. He loves his home. And he can also come back if we set up visiting, if we have 24-hour care for him, medical care at his house. And he wants to spend as much time as possible. And also, by the way, for many, many years, he was eligible to receive the homestead exemption, and even before he ever had, I mean, for years, he was eligible for 100% or at least quite a bit of a partial exemption. Several AARP at 42nd Center, the application even asks if you're in a nursing home. So others have told me that he should apply and qualify, and he will be spending more time at home with the proper medical care. He's not incapable of going home. He just will have to have 24-hour care. And he loves his home, and he just turned 102 July 2nd, and he deserves to enjoy his home. So the more we start taking him there, and I take him to the zoo, and I used to ophthalmology appointment, things like that, and Fontanelle Forest. So he will be spending quite a bit more time in his home. And again, it'll probably increase. He probably wants to spend most of the time when he does get near passing on. He probably will want to spend more. He loves the house, he loves the yard, watching the birds, and several people, including H&R Block people, have told us that he would qualify. And if others are in nursing homes and they're receiving the exemption, I don't see why my father shouldn't receive it. And again, he fought nearly 3.5 years all over Europe, Northern Africa, and Tunisia. When he came back, he never took advantage of any benefits. He's always worked as hard as he could. And again, he's contributed here years when he would have been eligible for exemptions. So in fairness to him, because he will be spending more and more time at his home, in his home, I would ask that he get the homestead exemption this year.
There, a motion, second on the floor to uphold the assessor's recommendation. Seeing no questions, please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioners Borgeson and Morgan voting no. All our commissioners voting yes to uphold the assessor's recommendation.
Thank you. We'll go to item J, which is a protest of the special evaluation on the Greenbelt disqualification for parcel number 0100970003 for the address, which is 13808 North 324th Street in Valley. Mr. Goodwillie.
Yes, this is a repeater as well. Last year, we denied the special valuation application on this parcel because we did not believe it is primarily used for agricultural purposes, which is the test. The vacant acres that are not associated with buildings or other improvements have to be primarily used for agricultural purposes. At that board meeting, I think the county board was trying to strike a compromise, and they basically said, well, we'll grant 5 acres of special valuation. So that's how we valued the property, with 5 acres with an ag value and the remainder of it at a rural res value. The application, a new application came in this year, and while we were valuing it that way, we still don't think the predominant use of the parcel is for agricultural purposes. I provided a packet for you all. There are pictures from 2019 that look remarkably similar to the pictures from 2018, and we're just not seeing it. I would also point out that on the application this year, the property owners represented that there are, for example, there's an active contract for goods from the property, there are sales tax filings, there's farm income. We've not seen any kind of an active contract. We've not gotten any sales tax filings. We certainly haven't ever seen a 1040 Schedule F income or loss from farming. And I would point out that most of the materials that Mr. and Mrs. Hannes have provided us over the years are things that are sort of, take my word for it, that really aren't verified by anybody else. The only thing I would point to that's relevant to the use of their property in their packet this year that has been actually verified by somebody else is, I think there's like a nursery stock license for 1 acre. But 1 acre isn't the same as 19 acres. And so our stance is we don't believe the property is primarily used for agricultural purposes.
I would make a motion to uphold the assessor's recommendation.
There's a motion by Commissioner Boyle to uphold the recommendation. Is there a second?
I'd like to speak.
Second by Commissioner Duda. Hold on. Yes, sir. If you want to say something, you got 5 minutes.
Yes, the property owner.
Well, sir, I need you to come to the mic. No, if you want, you got 5 minutes. And you can note the light system in front of you.
As last year, I appear before you again this year, giving you.
Sir, could you state your name for the record, please?
Michael Hannes.
Thank you.
Property owner for 13808 North 324th Street. And I request that you allow the property the agricultural classification that it has held since I purchased it back in the 1980s. Why? Because of the agricultural activities that are going on there. Now, they may not look like row cropping. They may not look like the most efficient agricultural activities, but I don't see anyone in this room here who is signing on to manage or advise or do anything to make this appear in their own minds to be more agricultural. My statement is if it looks like it's agriculture and people behave on it like it's agriculture, then it's agriculture. There's a lot of things growing out there that my county assessor, Stan Molotek, has not come to terms in visiting with me over. This year, he made a decision without any visiting at all. He says, you're not doing anything that's agriculture. And you can see in those things that I have filed with you that there's a lot of agriculture going on. And I'm asking this Board of Equalization to do its job, which is equalization. We had a flood in March in the Valley area this year, and that gave me the opportunity to learn an awful lot about my neighbors. We have a neighbor down the road who is doing nothing agricultural at all. And he has an agricultural classification, and there's nothing being grown out there. I'm actually growing things that are agricultural and horticultural related, and I'm engaged in behavior doing that. I don't see where the assessor has maintained the resolution that the Board of Equalization made on September 11th of 2018. That's why I'm asking to start all over again, because their response to me was, we don't see any agriculture going on. So yes, Mr. Goodwillie is right. We are back where we were last year. Now, I've asked for information from the county database of property values and other information that's public, that's kept in that database, and Mr. Goodwillie keeps avoiding giving it to me. Well, this spring I got to find out what some of the secrets were that he is hiding. If you walk from my property to the old Highway 275, which is Richmond Road, which was covered with debris after the March flood, and you walk down there visiting people and helping them, you will see that there's an airstrip on one agricultural classified property. I guarantee you, if I had an airstrip, I'd be told, you're not doing anything agricultural. There's nothing else growing on that airstrip. And the Board of Equalization has this classified as agriculture. There's another piece of property that looks like it's got a dog kennel on it. And it's classified as agriculture. And all these pieces of property between mine and the city of Valley have agricultural benefits, but there is no agriculture going on. I'm actually doing something, and I've brought it here to your attention. So what you're looking at is you're looking at an abuse of power, an abuse of authority, somebody who's come along and without notice taken away what I've enjoyed for many years, and then wants to just keep on without anything but naked statements, say, but there's no agriculture going on. I'm showing you agriculture in my evidence. And I can show you more agriculture in my evidence if you turn around and you say, that's not enough. We need to see more. I'm looking at property that's located near a river that's got agricultural rating, and I don't see how it's any different than the woods that I have on my property. I have woods to buffer me from the neighbors spraying, which would destroy my agriculture, because the neighbors have little responsibility in maintaining the way they use their spray. And so I'm asking you to please, I know you've already read the material and it would be a waste of time for me to go over it, but at least be where you were last year on giving the property partial agricultural classification, but I'm asking for the entire property to be agricultural
Thank you,
classification,
Mr. Harris.
like the others.
There's a motion, a second. Commissioner Kraft, you wanted to comment?
Yes. Hold on. Mr. Goodwillie, did you say you granted him the 5.1 acres?
We valued 5.02 acres at a dryland farming rate of $6,000 as opposed to the $8,000 rural residential rate that we had for that part of the county.
And I don't think I'm willing to grant him that. Can we take that back?
Well,
You
each year
granted it.
is a new he's filed a new application, and technically the test is the property primarily used for agricultural purposes.
Last year,
I'm sorry.
well, that's fine. Last year, because I'm still relatively unfamiliar with greenbelt exemptions, I felt we could justify granting it to him. But since that time, I've learned a lot more because I researched it a lot more. And I'm not willing to grant him an ounce of Greenland exemption. I just don't see it. Greenbelt, excuse me. So I'd like to make a motion to retract the application and make it all non-greenbelt.
Well, you'd have to make an amendment to the existing one on the floor.
That's what I was doing. That's what I thought I did.
That's the motion.
That is? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll accept that.
And
He's saying that's what the existing one is.
he accepted the motion.
No, the current one is.
The current one is
That.
no.
Oh, okay, the current one is none whatsoever?
Right.
Okay.
If I may respond to something that Mr. Hannis just said. Basically accused our office of abusing power, okay? I would just like you to know that that's kind of the pattern with Mr. Hannis. If someone says no to him, he makes accusations about them. This was.
Mr. Hannes, I'm actually to keep it in mind. Just, I know you want to, so if you want to be brief on it, I think we're
I
at
do want to be
resolution.
brief.
Okay.
In some meritless pro se litigation against Sears, Mr. Hannis made accusations against the trial judge,
Mr. Hannes, I'm
against the trial judge and opposing counsel. And so this is kind of what happens when you say no to Mr. and Mrs. Hannis. They accuse you of abusing power. That's not the case at all. We've observed that property. We just don't see any agricultural use on it.
With that, we have a motion and a second on item I as recommended by the assessor. Can I, with the motion and second as approval, include adjournment in that?
Yes, it would. Can I
Okay.
ask make a couple comments, please?
Very quickly.
Okay. to the gentleman who owns the property. It is not our responsibility to come and show you how to manage your land. And that's related to a statement you made. Second, you said if it looks like agriculture, then it is. Well, this doesn't have a clue of looking like agriculture. Therefore, if it doesn't look like agriculture, then it isn't using your logic. No, sir, this is not a court of law. You can sit down. And those are the statements I wanted to make. So all of your objections don't have any bearing here because this is not a court of law. Thank you, gentlemen. I move.
No, so we have a motion and a second to approve item I and adjourn. Item J and adjourn. Please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
We'll call to order now the Douglas County Board of Commissioners meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson? Commissioner Boyle? Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Duda? Commissioner Kraft? Commissioner Morgan? Mr. Chair.
Here, item A is the minutes, item 1 is minutes and claims. Letter A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, August 27, 2019. Item B is approval of claims submitted for payment and processed through Tuesday, September 10, 2019. What's the will of the board?
I'll be abstaining
Wait.
because of that check to my account.
Okay, motion approved by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Duda. Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Morgan abstaining. All other commissioners voting yes.
Okay, just so the public, we had some requests to move some items, so for the record, so people know where we're going. We're going to do item 3 first, then we'll go to the public hearings and do the budget, and then we'll go down to human resources. So just so you know, follow me in, but this is where we're going. So we're going to go to item 3, which is recognition and proclamations. Item A, item A and B, we're going to do together, but I see representatives here if they want to speak. Item A is recognition of the following county employees. Retiring Ms. Renee Iowan, who's retiring from the Douglas County Youth Center after 29 years of service, and also recognize Mr. David Moore for retiring from the Sheriff's Office after 19 years of service. Is there a motion to approve both of those?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Kraft. Do you all want to say anything? Are you good? Okay. With that, I want to thank them for their service over the years and wish them well in their retirement. With that, please vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
We're going to go to the public hearing, item 5, and we're going to go to item B, which is the budget. A hearing to set the final tax rate for the 2019-20 budget. Mr. Lorenz, whenever you're ready. I will, as soon as he gets down. He's going to make the opening piece. With that, we will open the public hearing. After Mr. Lorenz presents, we'll give the opportunity for the public to comment, all the public make their comment, and then we'll go to public hearing and go for a motion. With that, Mr. Lorenz.
Okay, hi. Joe Lorenz, County Finance Director. Talk a little bit about what we're doing today. We really follow a two-step process with 2 public hearings. On July 30th, we had a public hearing, a budget hearing, in which the budget was presented and approved by the county board on a 6-to-1 vote. And the second piece we do is a special public hearing to set the final tax request or the tax levy, which we can do after the final valuations have come out from the assessor's office. And it really is just using the budget and the final valuations to come up with what the tax levy is. So I'll go through this one page and take people through it that shows how we calculate that, and note that this page is a little longer than it usually is, and that's because there were some changes from LB 103 that we worked with to be compliant, to make sure we were compliant. We worked with the county attorney, with our office, with Marcos and Diane, and we also talked to Deanne Hefner in Lincoln, who is the state auditor of public accounts. And so we feel that this material we're presenting is fully compliant with the changes from LB 103. So with that, the lines, and all this is required information. You can see last year what the property tax request was and what the tax rate was. It was 28.059 cents for the county tax levy, which was at that point unchanged for the 6th year in a row. And then you can see the certified taxable values for 2018 and 2019. And the far right column is the Douglas County Library Fund, which is governed by an interlocal where we reimburse the city of Omaha for people in unincorporated Douglas County who...
All of the libraries in the
okay.
county get funding from it.
All the libraries within Douglas County, right. So you can see that. But the year-over-year change in certifiable tax value for Douglas County last year was 7.81%. And so if you do the calculation where you take last year's request and this year's valuation, you see that the levy would drop to 26.18 cents. But this year's budget, which was approved on July 30th, calls for a proposed property tax request of a little over $140 million, and that equates to a property tax levy of 29.559 cents, which is basically consistent with keeping the levy flat plus adding a penny and a half to fund the new Juvenile Justice Center. So the percentage increase in the property tax rate from the prior year in the county portion would be 5.3%. Well, for the total Douglas County taxpayer, when you take into account the city and the schools, that penny and a half equates to a 0.7% increase in the total levy payable by Douglas County taxpayers. And the last piece of information, it's a new piece required by LB 103, is the percentage increase or decrease in the total operating budget from the prior year, and this was the budget that was approved on July 30th, and the total operating budget increased 4.2% for the county. So that's the calculation and the request to set the levy at 29.559 cents for the county and 2.085 cents for the library. And with that, I would open it up to public comment or any questions.
This is a public hearing, so if anybody wants to make comment, please do now. Please note the light system if you want to, so now it's open for anybody to make their comment on the budget. Again, we're open. This is the time you're going to have to talk on the budget. If I close the public hearing, that time is done.
Larry Shore, 5115 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. I'm sorry, but I don't find that on the agenda anywhere. I wasn't aware that there was a public hearing on this today.
It's there under public hearing on item B.
Thank you.
Okay. Again, is there anybody that wants to comment on the budget? Once we close the public hearing, there's no public comment. Going once. Closing the public hearing. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Kraft, there a second? Second by Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Kavanaugh. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. And I want to thank my colleagues for moving this up on the agenda. I'm going to vote no on this. It's a substantial increase in everybody's property tax bill, about 13%. We're looking at this increase primarily because of the desire by my colleagues to put money aside for the Juvenile Justice Center project, which, as we all know, is tied up in courts. It doesn't really exist until the courts rule one way or another. But in anticipation of that, everybody's going to get a property tax increase, and their bill's going to go up about 13%. I predicted this all along in the discussions over this over the last year and some months. This is a big property tax increase. Voting for that project is a big property tax increase. And so buckle up, everybody, because 13% property tax increase is coming your way, whether you like it or not. And it is, in my opinion, unnecessary to pay no bid contracts that would not submitted to the public for approval. And as a matter of fact, are not out there right now. They are tied up in court. So 13% property tax increase is what's being voted on here. Your bill will go up by about that much to pay your Douglas County share of your property tax bill, regardless of the spin that you're hearing today. What you paid last year to Douglas County in property tax and what you pay next year is going to be about a 13% increase. So I'm going to vote no on that. I think it's unnecessary. We could operate Douglas County government on existing revenues without a mill levy increase at all, but for this unnecessary expense that was not submitted to the voters for approval and is predicated on no bid contracts that are largely unnecessary for the effective operation of Douglas County government. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Excuse me. I wanted to speak particularly about one of the largest problems that's facing the budget, and that's corrections. We're going to need a budget supplement for corrections, I believe. Is that right, Mr. Labrie?
It looks that way, yes.
The salaries over at corrections due to overtime driven by record levels of inmates is approaching 1.1 million. And in addition to that, the revenues are about $800,000 below budget due to the decline in immigration, holdees, ICE, and U.S. Marshal prisoners because the jail has no space for them. And in addition to that, LB 605 was passed, which allowed the state government to remove or release prisoners from their crowded jail, prison, which is, I understand why it's being done. But then they come back to their home county, and most of them, of course, come back to Douglas. So we have had an influx of prisoners from the state facility that has really added to the crowding, record numbers of people being admitted. And LB 605 has exacerbated the situation to the point where we now have, again, people in the gymnasium sleeping, and we have them sleeping in what is called boats, which are plastic. They look like boats, and they do have some comforts, but that is not what we ought to be doing. We have no choice. And the state, again, has sent these prisoners to us, and we're doing the very best we can with no funding from the state. They used to pay us, but they don't anymore. The last time I looked, they were close to $25 million in arrears. Governor Heineman said, we're just not paying this anymore. And we probably should have sued them, but they have the authority over us. So we're really, the taxpayers of Douglas County are really taking a bite. And I resent these comments about, from some of the senators about we need to stop the increases in local spending. Well, then tell the governor and the legislature to quit sending people to us that we have to house, and also mandating all of these services and so forth that we have to make up for. I'll give you an example. Over at the Douglas County Health Center, there's a really excellent program of peer people who suffer from mental illness, which of course everybody likes to talk about, whether they say it's the cause of shooting, which I don't believe, or just the mental illness crisis, which of course we do have, and it crosses the lines, Following Ann's death, I sought mental health help, and so I'm one of those persons, and I understand what needs to be done. And so I really resent the implications that, the county is off on a spending spree. We are stepping up. Over at the Douglas County Health Center, the state cut $98,000 on a peer program of mentally ill people who are recovering, helping people who are still suffering. They cut $98,000. Oh, okay, thanks a lot. So I made a motion that we add that to the budget, and we did. So I'm responsible for adding $98,000 to this budget to treat mentally ill people that the state said to hell with you. I'm getting really worn out by the state cutting these expenses and then lecturing to us about cutting expenses. It can't be done. And we are doing the very best we can with the resources we have, which is property taxes. We don't have the restaurant tax. We don't have the income tax. We have property taxes. And so unfortunately, we are locked in to levying taxes on property to meet the demands that the state tells us we have to do. It's really quite simple. And as for the property, that we desire to build a courthouse, it is a need. And to call it a desire is totally inaccurate and suggesting that we're just kind of out there, oh, let's just have it. You should go through the Public Defender's Office, and Mr. Kavanaugh has, and there's nothing against this, but he has relatives who work in the Public Defender's Office, and they'll tell you, and I talked to his relatives, his nephew and others, about the crowded situation down there. I saw 8 paralegals, if you want to call them that. They're young people working on trying to assist the public defender. 8 in one office. 8 in one office, intended for one person. So they need space. And plus, working underground is not a good situation. This building was not designed. We should not be having people work underground, particularly the Public Defender's Office, who work with cases like this that are sometimes really brutal. So it is a need. And as far as no bid, I raised that question when this was being put together, and we asked the county attorney, is this complying with state law? And he said, yes, it was. So that's why I moved on it. And as you know, I voted no on some of these things with the Building Commission and triggered a whole lot of controversy. And the reason was that I was concerned about the numbers. And frankly, I'll be candid, I am still concerned about the numbers. So I'm not really sure who qualifies that's in our place now that could go into these programs, because the people we have committed some pretty violent acts, and I'm not sure they would qualify for some of these programs, but that's another subject. But this was done legally, it was done in the open, and it is not a desire, it is a need. And so I think we need to get that out again. I respect Mr. Kavanaugh's concern. I was with him on a lot of these things. I would have liked to have seen a real alternative. We didn't see that. We have to do what's best for these children, and that's what this is. We have got to get them out of this facility. We now have 3 places where children can go. They will never go to the detention center at all. If there's a fist fight at Nathan Hale School, they don't take them to the detention center. They'll take them to the Omaha Home for Boys. They'll call in their parents, and it's an excellent facility. That's what the compromise brought, and that's why I voted yes. So I support this budget, and we need to adequately fund corrections and these other operations.
Thank you, Commissioner Wall. Commissioner Morgan.
Joe Lorenz, you've been the finance director, I want to say, almost 9 years. I heard it said here at the board just a few minutes ago, I think I heard it correctly, that this means a 13% increase in your property taxes. Is that what I heard?
That's what Commissioner Kavanaugh quoted.
Go ahead and speak louder. I want to be sure people...
That was Commissioner Kavanaugh's number, yes.
Would you tell us really what the increase is? Is it 13%, as Commissioner Kavanaugh stated?
The levy is increasing 5.3%. So maybe he can clarify for us how he gets to the 13.
And isn't the property tax increase for a taxpayer, as far as the county, their taxes that they pay on their home, 0.07%?
Of the total levy.
So
yes.
it's less than 1% that Doug Kagan would see in who's with the Nebraska taxpayers. It would be less than 1% that he will see in his property taxes. Am I correct?
Less than 1% in the total property tax levy, yes.
So I just want to be clear on this, and I apologize to Doug for using you as an example, but I want it clear that this isn't a 13% increase in your property taxes, period. So, there's so much misinformation. The other thing is we know from being in the county attorney's office, which all of us have been in numerous times, that he's in the basement. It's been flooded many times, that we're mandated to build more courtrooms. Commissioner Duda, Commissioner Boyle on the Building Commission have talked about the fact that there is not any more room and that we need to build that facility. And let me state something else. I know that it's nice to have the people vote on a bond issue, and it's 90-some million dollars to build not any youth center, but to build that new Hall of Justice for courts, county attorney, probation, and so on because of the overcrowding. That if we had to go outside because we know that's a necessity, we would have to try to rent space, and it would cost way more than what that's going to cost if someone builds it out for us, builds courtrooms, and so on. And we've been through those discussions for nearly a year. And you've been in some of those discussions. So I think, as we heard with the 13%, that this means a 13% property tax increase to the taxpayers is totally a misstatement. And again, I just want to thank you for the work that you do, and thank the other commissioners for all of the questions and comments that have been made on this important issue.
Yeah, Commissioner, I just want to make a point in what's really driving our budget. And the focal point would be what's going on in corrections right now, but Commissioner Boyle talked about the public defender, is that we are seeing a significant increase in the cost of the criminal justice system, which over the past 10 years has been increasing on average at 1.5% rate over inflation in each year. And I'm working on a presentation that I'm going to bring to the board in the near future, where I'm going to kind of present that to the board and show the trends in criminal justice cost and how much they're increasing, and then present, and we can talk about potential options or alternatives, because I think this model that we're using right now cannot continue to go on unchecked without there being significant tax increases for the population, which I don't think anybody wants.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kraft.
Yes. Commissioner Morgan, if you would answer this, you own more than one or two pieces of property, don't you?
I think so.
And if there was a 13% tax increase, I think you'd be aghast, and you'd probably be going broke.
I made it anyway, but
Okay, you wouldn't be going broke, but it'd be hurting the bottom
No.
line.
I mean,
Okay.
correct.
Now, Mr. Kavanaugh claims to be an attorney, and he knows that not all court cases are won by whoever's filing the case. And so the claim that's being made, most of these, in my belief, as a non-attorney, and our professional attorneys that's advised the county, this claim is unjustified. So we'll have to see it. But we have to do the contingency. What if? What if is a very important contingency. What if the group that Kavanaugh, behind Kavanaugh and suing the county, what if they were to fell in court and we didn't have the money there? What if? Now, what if we had bought the AIM building, as Mr. Kavanaugh so strongly pushed to begin with? Would he still be fighting this? I mean, he was pushing so hard for the AIM building. Push, trying to reach a compromise. Called me and said, can't we compromise over and over and over again? He wanted us to buy the AIM building. And the thing about that perhaps Mr. Kavanaugh doesn't know is that I have a degree in mathematics. I may not have been good at it. And Commissioner Duda has a degree in mathematics. I know he was good at it. He's corrected me once. So what I see is manipulating numbers, massaging them to meet his needs, Mr. Kavanaugh's needs, and a totally false accusation that is disparaging the rest of us, is actually insulting what he has said about us and what he's implied about us. And, less than 1% increase, I'm just aghast. I wonder, did Mr. Kavanaugh fail math in high school? It's just a question I'm posing. I have no clue. Thank you.
Mr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Just to clarify, and the numbers are clear on this, and I'd be happy to provide them to anybody who wants them. We're talking about a 13% increase in the Douglas County tax bill based on property tax. 13% increase in the property tax bill to pay your Douglas County proportion of your property tax. I'm surprised that the taxpayers for freedom haven't stood up here and yelled and screamed about this, but maybe there are other reasons that they're silent today. But the numbers don't lie. We got 7.2 increase in overall valuations. And those numbers are readily available from the Assessor's Register of Deeds office or from our own budget information. And this is a 5.3 increase in the Douglas County mill levy. And that results in a 13% property tax increase for your Douglas County property tax bill. That's what's being voted on here today. You can spin it any way you want. This is a big property tax increase. That's going to take away from our ability to spend on much-needed improvements in the Douglas County correction system. It's going to take away from our ability to spend on the undermet need for mental health, particularly long-term mental health services that are totally lacking in this county. And it's going to take away from our ability to spend on programs for our young people to help with the juvenile justice system. This is based on a bricks and mortar project. This is based on we're going to build a building on no bid contracts without a vote of the people. And we're going to raise your property taxes to do it. That's what's being voted on here today. I'm against that. I'm going to vote no on this 13% increase in your property tax bill because it's unnecessary, it's wasteful, and it's going the wrong direction. We're not going to have resources to do the things that we need for you, the taxpayers and the citizens of Douglas County, because we're spending it on a construction project that is not subject to your vote and is not subject to competitive bidding. It's wrong. I'm going to vote no, and I'm happy to provide all of the backup information that anybody would like to see relative to that 13% property tax bill increase that you're going to all experience. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, I want to just mention a couple of other things. I neglected to thank my fellow Commissioner, P.J. Morgan. We are co-chairs of the Budget Committee and had a tremendous amount of help from Mr. Lorenz, and I really appreciate it very much. Sometimes we didn't agree, but we got it done, and he's an excellent, we're so lucky to have Joe as our finance guy, and Chicago's loss is our gain, so there you have it. I want to mention a couple of things that I am going to seriously propose, and I've brought it up before. I brought it up to previous governors and not the present governor. I've spoken to many times, but not necessarily about this. What needs to happen across the state, I believe, is that all criminal justice expenses should be paid by the state of Nebraska. All of these crimes that people are accused of are based in state law, with the exception of some that are the result of the city of Omaha, but they do pay for their prisoners, which is unlike the state. And ICE and so forth, they pay for prisoners too, but again, we don't have room for them. But I think the state needs to take over all the costs of criminal justice, from the sheriffs, from the time they arrest, the Omaha police, the time they're arrest. We need to pay for the public defender, the county attorney, the correction facility, which is the payroll's $35 million. It's going up. We need to have the state step in and pay this, and this should happen all across the state, and this is nothing new. There are several times, and I remember one case out in western Nebraska where a shooting ended up in their county, and they didn't have the resources to pay for the prosecution, and it was just a big lawsuit, big case, and a lot of people were being charged with serious offenses, felonies and so forth, and shootings, and the state stepped in and sent someone up. As a matter of fact, I think it was, might have been Mr. Klein, who at the time was working for the Attorney General, and I believe he went up and prosecuted the case. I could be wrong, but I know that the state did loan someone up there to help. Now I'm glad they did, they should, but we don't have that kind of luxury. As a matter of fact, it's kind of reverse for us. There's a piece of legislation that was passed some time ago, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I don't have all the details right probably, but I believe when a filing fee is paid, that some of the money was supposed to go to help rural parts of the state with public defenders, but instead of that, it's ended up being diverted to Lancaster County. So here in Omaha, when filing fees are paid, it goes into a state fund, and then it goes to Lancaster County. And I went down and spoke to the director of that. It's been a real sore point because we are paying fully for Douglas County, and then Lancaster gets this private organization. I guess it's private. I don't know how it's really run, but they get money from Douglas County to defend people in Lincoln, and they're Lancaster County, and it was supposed to go to counties all across the state, and it doesn't. And trying to get that money back, we had a bill once that didn't get out of committee, I don't believe, but we are getting hammered here by so many different organizations and laws that are so unbelievably unfair, and that's another one. So in addition to, I think we need to talk seriously about a legislative bill and go through NACO, and I know the rest of the counties would go for this because I've told you before that I've stood up at the meetings with several hundred county officials, and I stand in the back of the room because that way I can yell. And I yell at the governor and say, "Governor, take over criminal justice. It's killing us." And the place erupts in applause because everybody's getting hammered across the state, whether it's a small jail, whether it's police, the sheriff trying to pay for all these things. And it comes down to, are we going to put gravel on the roads out in the counties? Or are we going to pay for law enforcement? Well, they have to pay for law enforcement. So then either raise taxes or no gravel. I mean, it's really tough. It's tougher on the smaller counties. We're not near, if you talk about 13%, we're not even near what our ceiling is on setting a mill levy. A lot of other counties are at their level, and that is awful. That is really dangerous. And so that's something that I think we could overcome if we said to the state, you take over criminal justice. Okay, well, in addition to that, or an alternative to that, is we need to have sports betting in Nebraska. It's time to open it up. And let me be very clear, I don't gamble, except I do try to win the Powerball and the Mega Million once in a while. I do buy tickets on that, but I buy 5, that's about it, never more. But I've never won, obviously, or I wouldn't be sitting here. So anyway, I do bet on those lotteries. It's a lot of fun, and I buy chances and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we need to have sports gambling in Nebraska, and I think we ought to set it up by congressional district. And so we can vote, we can have the people vote on it, we got to find the mechanism. But I'm telling you, this is making me crazy. When I always see ads on television, sports betting in Council Bluffs, right, we can see them from here. So that's what we need to do, and let's do it by congressional district, let's do a vote of the people, let's have sports gambling in Douglas County. We need it, we need the money.
Thank you.
Instead of it going to Iowa.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Morganson.
I just wanted to thank Joe for his presentation and get back to the facts of the increasing costs of our criminal justice. And I look forward to your presentation on that. Because at the end of the day, you are right, we cannot continue to stay on this path, and the reforms that we're talking about in both adult and juvenile are even more important than they have been in all the years that we've talked about it. I do want to make a couple of statements, though, because money that the county has should not go towards long-term care. That is, again, another state, which has been stated many, many times, a state responsibility that they are not doing, and that's why we're ending up with folks in our jail. Not all of them, but a high percentage of folks should be in long-term care, paid for by the state of Nebraska. Again, a very costly program that they're shifting those costs onto the counties through the criminal justice system. That we will have money for programs for our young people because we do have an influx of $5 million for those programs. And one point that I wanted to just expand on with Commissioner Boyle saying that the county only has property taxes, and that's true, and we should not and cannot be compared with the city who gets property tax, will tax, occupational tax, restaurant tax, and sales tax. So we have a duty to fulfill the requirements that the state mandates us to do. And as we've talked about today, many come down unfunded, or many are being shifted by the state down to us. And so the budget that we're talking about is really driven by our increase in the criminal justice cost. And we are on a good path, and we need to remain on that path to be able to create these reforms in order to get off that path, reduce our cost, and also have programs that are going to be better rehabilitative for folks to become productive citizens and pay their taxes as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. The elephant in the room is the new courthouse. Absolutely, the criminal justice costs have been growing by leaps and bounds. What was a third of the budget when I was elected to the county board, the criminal justice cost is now over 2/3 of our budget. It continues to grow, and it continues to strain our budget. But the courthouse annex is what has put us in this position today. There has been a recognition by all 7 commissioners, finally, reluctantly, that we have to grow the courthouse. It's a very basic responsibility of county government to provide an adequate courthouse. And when we have, the legislature wants to give us a 7th juvenile judge, a 17th district court judge, nowhere to put them. We're saying we have a space crisis. Don't give us any more judges. Even without the impediments being placed in front of us for the new courthouse annex, we knew it was going to be a minimum of 3 years before we have any usable space in there. The law library is probably going to go away. That we probably will not have the Amador Law Library much longer because we just don't have the room. We have to start putting more public defenders in more places that don't exist. All 7 commissioners have given verbal recognition and support to the courthouse annex, which is over 80% of the tax increase that we're talking about. People came to the building commission. Every commissioner came to the building commission saying, we want the courthouse annex, we want you to do this. We were told this was why Jack Kavanaugh had created the building commission in the first place, and they're the appropriate vessel to be carrying this forward. And I said at the time, this is going to require a tax increase to pay for it. Well, we'll worry about that later. We'll fight that. We want this, but we'll fight that. We want the building, we just don't want to pay for it. I would rather not be raising taxes. I hate raising taxes. My taxes are $50,000 a year. I hate raising taxes. I don't take this lightly. But it's a basic responsibility to provide an adequate courthouse. We have changed the focus. It has been very much diverted in this conversation to the juvenile detention center when over 80% of the project is the courthouse annex. And that's what all 7 commissioners have agreed to. That's what we're trying to move forward with. 6 commissioners agreed that this seems like a logical time to look at a new juvenile detention center at the same time, but recognizing that the driver is the courthouse annex and the bulk of the expense. I guess I apologize truly to the Douglas County taxpayers. I hate putting them in this position. I don't like doing it, but we gotta have a courthouse. We can't just put our head in the sand and do the politically popular thing of saying, if it's going to raise our taxes, I won't do it. We've got to have it. we've got to do it. We have no choice, and there's only one way to pay for it, and that's property taxes. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Joe, thanks for the hard work and everybody on the budget. There's a motion and a second for the budget. Please vote. I'm going to vote on it because I asked earlier if you found to speak on the budget that you come then. I was clear on that. So we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioner Kavanaugh votes no. Other commissioners voting yes.
With that, we're going to move to the Human Resources and item 3, and that is the resolution setting salaries for the county board for 2023, 2024. Commissioner Duda, I'll let you make the amendment, so that's the one deal, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I would like to propose, and I'm not sure, well, I guess this would be a motion.
Yes.
We have it listed on the agenda at 3%, and what I would be more comfortable at is 2.5%. And talking to some other commissioners, that seems like a more reasonable figure. We're trying to stay current with the other, relative to the other elected officials. They'll probably be going up a little more than that. Anyhow, what I would like to move is that we set the salary for the Douglas County Commissioners for 2023 at $59,815, and that for 2024, the figure would be $61,310. Those both represent 2.5% increases over the previous year.
I'll second that.
This motion by Commissioner Duda, second by Commissioner Morgan.
What was the first?
Yes, there's time. Please now.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good morning, Doug Kagan, 416 South 130th Street, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. We do understand that you all are dedicated to your work and spend long hours sometimes on daily and weekend board, department, and even regional and national business. But notwithstanding, your job status is part-time. The board now uses a standard for pay raises by comparing the increases to those of employees and board members in other counties. We believe that the standard leads to an ever-spiraling rise in employee salaries and benefits as government subdivisions race to keep up with others. Instead, we suggest that the board peg its total compensation increases to the Midwest Urban Cost of Living and Compensation Indexes, the same indexes used by many private employers. Today, you are considering, considering pay increases for 4 and 5 years in advance, too far in advance. We have no knowledge now how much the cost of living will increase or decrease by that time, or the state of our economy. In review, this board voted itself a 3% pay boost in 2015 and a 3% pay hike in 2016. Then a whopping 31% pay hike for the next 3 years. If you pass this new resolution, and I based it on the 3%, your salaries will have risen by 50% in 8 years, going from 2017 to 2024, whereas the Midwest urban cost of living has risen by only 1.6% if you go back the last couple of years, 2017 through August of 2019. Meanwhile, this board raised our property taxes by at least 5.3%. Raising your future salaries again at this time, earlier in the calendar year than usual, while hiking our property taxes is like rubbing salt in taxpayer wounds. It is both impolitic and inconsiderate. We urge you to forego future salary increases at this time and instead work with taxpayers to establish a more formalized system of periodic pay increases for commissioners. Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public that wants to comment?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. I'm just looking at special hearing, and I didn't realize that today was a public hearing where we could talk back and forth on that topic.
Okay, Larry, I'm going to ask you, are you on the salary topic? Because I'm actually
I
still
am on the topic that was just talked about, the property tax because
we're
he
not on
brought
the-
it up too.
we're not on the
And on
property
this
tax.
item.
Now, listen to me.
We
We're not on
sat
the
here and
property
listened to
tax.
all the reasons why we
Larry.
need.
Larry, listen to me, listen to me.
We don't need gambling to pay our property tax.
I'm
We
gonna ask
need
you
you
to
to
s-
lower the taxes.
Larry, I'm asking you to stay on that
Thank
salary.
you.
And if you don't,
Since
then
it
I'll
was
ask.
not on the agenda, I will bring it up again. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody from the public want to comment? Again, anybody from the public want to comment? With that, we'll go to Commissioner Kavanaugh, then Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no on this. I think it's ironic that the same day that we, considering a 13% property tax bill increase, that we considered a pay raise to the people who were voting for the property tax increase. It's emblematic of kind of the tone-deaf theme that's run throughout this entire issue. I'm not against adequate compensation for public officials. I'm against this pay raise at this time in light of what we just did on the property tax increase. I think it's ironic that the Taxpayers for Freedom representative doesn't say a word about the multi-million-dollar property tax increase, but feels that it's appropriate to get up and talk about compensation, which is relative to the property tax increase, a much smaller number of tax dollars. Apparently, that doesn't collate with the Taxpayer for Freedom representative. The proposal that we have before us, even with the amendment, is not something that I can support, and I intend to vote no. Thank you.
And, excuse me, just a minute. I believe I will support this. I'm 99% certain. But I will say this. Thank you. It used to be very common for a commissioner to run again and not be challenged. I believe in competition. The more I'm challenged, the more competitive I become. I already know of some people who are looking to challenge me, and that's great. There's at least 3 of them. At least 3. All of them have talked to me, all of them have told me they're going to challenge me, and I welcome that. I ran once without being challenged, and I felt empty. And I'm serious about this. It's the competitiveness. I ran, once we raised the salary to something somebody could literally give up their job for, because this is, even though it's classified by some as a part-time, I had meetings on Wednesday, I had meetings on Friday, somehow I didn't have any last Thursday. Monday I had 2 meetings, Tuesday of course is taken. How many bosses allow you to have that much time off? You either have to be independently wealthy, self-employed, or retired. So by making and keeping up with the times, it encourages people to run so that we can have qualified, and I will say this, the 3 people I've talked to are extremely qualified. Of course, I'd like to think I'm better qualified, but I'll have to prove it. And I like that. So I decided I will support that. It is not, if I don't get elected, I won't enjoy it. And that's fine. I've never thought I needed to do things to get reelected. I never look at the next, people who know the smoking ban know about that. I don't need a political job bad enough to become a prostitute, like some people. It's just, shouldn't be looking for the next election, it should be looking for the next generation. And that's what we are doing today for the next generation of possible electorates, and for the next generation of youth going through our court system, and for the next generation of the entire Douglas County area. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
I think the suggestion that Mr. Kagan made really strikes me here. It says that we urge you to forego future salary increases at this time and instead work with taxpayers to establish a more formalized system of periodic pay increases. And I would expand that too. I think, we need to probably talk to some of the people in the business community as well and listen also to taxpayers. And I look at this raise and it's, what it comes down to is $147 a month, and that's less than $5 a day, $4.90. So it's not a big increase, although it appears to be and so forth. But what really triggered all of this is probably my fault, because for several years, I think at least maybe 4 years for sure, maybe 5, we were working with unions, and that's when they really started to unionize a lot. And so I thought that what we ought to do is set an example, and so I proposed no increase at all. And we did that for quite a few years. And it really threw us behind, and you start looking at things, and I know that, maybe there's some people who object to us looking at other counties, but that's about the only way to really measure what the compensation should be. And it is not a job, when the phone rings at which I've had at 4:45 in the morning, and there's something going on at corrections or something, I get a taxpayer calling me, I have the phone next to me, my cell. And when that happens, I don't think, oh, gee whiz, this is really I answer the phone and do what I have to do and make calls, One early morning, a call came in that the power was out at corrections, and they had called in police to stand by outside, and the sheriff's office to stand by outside the facility so that the security could not be breached. And so when I talked to him, I said, have you called the Omaha Fire Department to let them know that the service is out, and have you communicated to them? Because if an emergency occurs, you want to have an ambulance ready, and it had skipped their mind. So they called them immediately. So 2 rescue squads were sent to the facility as well. And I drove down and looked at it because I live pretty close by, and it was really important to see, the police cars out front with their lights on and so forth, and guarding the building. Because you never know, we have 1,300 people in there who are imprisoned, and if something happened to the power, it would be a disaster. So anyway, they're very effective, and that comes from planning and working with them. And I am very active with corrections and try to make sure that I'm trying to do the best I can and support them in their efforts. They have a lot of people leave. It's a tough job, and so we have a lot of turnover. We're kind of back where we were before. The county board decided to raise salaries dramatically to compete and overcome the facilities near us, and we are the best paid in the area, and we have to be. So at any event, I think it's a small amount, but at the same time, I think I want to do what Doug has suggested. I think we need to take a breath and listen to some of the taxpayers and see what people in the business community have to say. I think it would give us some credibility with taxpayers if we do it, although I think we're in pretty good shape sometimes, though, when we do these things that people characterize as behind closed doors, and they're not. It's hard to swallow that. So I'm not going to support the pay increase because I want to do what Doug suggested. I've always thought that we should begin that, and I think we can today. So I intend to visit with Doug and see what he has in his mind. So I hope everybody understands that, but I think it's a good suggestion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second.
Just so I'm clear, this is just on the amendment?
The amendment is the motion, because we...
Okay.
yeah, the
So
amendment is-
this approves?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, motion by Commissioner Duda, second by Commissioner Morgan.
Can I
Oh,
just
sorry,
want to-
Commissioner Woods.
And I guess, and I've been one that has opposed the last pay increase that we had because of what actually Doug was talking about. But we actually created that mess ourselves by not doing small increment increases over the course of time. And when it got out of whack, it got out of whack. And we tried to fix it all in one full swoop, and it was horrible. I mean, it was absolutely horrible. And so we came back around and we did talk about how do we stay the course with small, market-driven, comparable county salaries to other jurisdictions. And so one thing I want to make clear is that we aren't setting our salaries, because we don't know if we're going to be here. This is for 2023 and 2024. And so this goes out a few years, and again, we don't know if we'll be here or not, so I want to make that clear. But again, we're doing kind of what you talked about, Doug, and that is we're taking a better and a more strategic look at this. And I'm not against having people sit down and talk with you guys and come up with, okay, how do we move forward from here on? Because it's not just, I mean, we set everybody's salaries. And that's a good idea, and I'm open to that. But I think if we get off the course of not doing the small increments, we're going to do a disservice again, not only to the people who sit in these seats, but to the taxpayers by 1 year having these ridiculous high increases. So I'll be supporting the resolution.
That there's a motion and a second, please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioners Boyle and Kavanaugh voting no, other commissioners voting yes.
Okay, for the record, just note, item C on the board's agenda, which is Child and Youth Service Committee meeting, is just minutes from meetings. Those are as submitted. Item D has been asked to be laid over, so that will not be considered today, and we don't need to act on that, do we? We just need to, they want to take it off, so we're going to postpone it. Item 1, in community service, they want to postpone that.
They do.
So I don't need to lay it over, I just need to, I cannot handle it, right?
You can handle it either way. I don't think we
Okay.
have a layover date, so I
We
would
don't.
simply ask the board to let us bring it back before you at a later date, if that would
Okay.
be agreeable.
So just note from the board, we were removing item D under community services. Now we'll go back up to the consent agenda, and there are 14 items on the consent agenda. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Duda. Please vote. Commissioner Boyle.
Motion passes 7-0.
Commissioner Rogers,
I was reading the amendment, or excuse me, the minutes from in the JAC. I think it was on the, I believe it was the meeting on the August 6th. And I was curious about, maybe it was the September 3rd, but in any event, on the Juvenile Assessment Center, there was a comment that a behavior health intervention program lost funding. And I'm sorry to drop this on you. I should ask you, I suppose. Can you tell us, do you remember what
Yes.
that's all about?
Basically, that money used to be given out of the community-based aid formula directly to the JAC to administer. Now organizations are applying for that directly. So the JAC lost it. It was put in the pot for community organizations to apply for.
Okay.
So it was just transferred to another place.
The need will still be met?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Now, no, the need being met was not adequate is what we had, but
Okay.
that money's not lost. It's
Okay.
just not at the JAC.
So it'll still be in some place?
Yes.
Offering that service?
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, we'll go to item 4, and then citizens' comments. It's an opportunity for citizens to comment on board of commissioners-related items not on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Please come down.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. This was not printed on the agenda, so I'm going to mention it. Back a few minutes ago, when we had to listen to the various commissioners actually convict themselves of overspending. If we have to resort to gambling to raise money, maybe we should stop spending. If we have to have this much discourse over whether the annex includes a juvenile center or it doesn't or whatever, maybe we're overspending. Mathematics and statistics can cloud the picture. The question is, do the taxpayers, whether they're for freedom or just taxpayers, want overspending? Do they have a right to ask you to stop that? Yes, we do. No, it's not a courtroom, but we had to listen to that discussion, that it's a courtroom. But it's okay for us to sit here and listen to, on our taxpayer and out of my billfold, commissioners pick on each other, assassinate each other's character. But no, it's not a courtroom. Thank you.
Other citizens' comments? Seeing none, we will move on back to public hearings. Item A is a special use permit request from the Curtis Corporation, Curtis G. Warner applicant. This is a public hearing that was held 2 weeks ago. The public hearing is still open. There were some specific things that the board requested to check up on, so Doug, I will let you update us on that. Now, note, this is, so I'm going to do this. We had one shot at this at the first deal. If you're going to be on the 5-minute clock, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Doug?
Thank you, Commission. Again, this was tabled from your August 20th meeting. Just a reminder, the Planning Commission on July the 10th recommended approval of this special use with conditions on a 6-2 vote. Since your August 20th meeting, a meeting was held with Sheriff Dunning and 2 deputies, and communication with Waterloo Fire Chief Travis Harlow has been by email. Both the sheriff and the fire chief have been emailed the revised proposed conditions, which were in your packet, and both have commented to, quote, "looks good to me." Before you today are the Planning Commission conditions with revisions. They were in your packet. Each proposed condition I have on a separate slide. I'd be happy to go through each one of those slides one by one with you, or I would just entertain questions.
Let's go through it one more time to be fair.
Okay, yes, sir.
Sorry. And just want to have these been updated, addressed to conversations from the last meeting? Some of the points made, can you answer those questions at the same time? There was some specific requests made last time. Can you just address those questions as you go through?
Of
if you
the
have the opportunity?
commissioners?
Yeah.
I believe that they are, yes.
Okay, we'll go through.
Okay, so as we go through the slides, anything that is underlined is new. Anything that is scratched out would be deleted. So we do have some updated drawings, and so we've referenced those with the date of those. Again, this is the site, 2 indoor venues and 1 outdoor venue. Okay, number of transportation improvements, and again, bear in mind, these are at 100% of the applicant's expense. The county will not be paying for any of these. So the state DOT is requiring a right turn lane. So for traffic from the east going west, there will be a right turn lane, and that will have to be built prior to a certificate of occupancy for the first building. Then a left turn lane, again following DOT requirements. So this would be traffic from the west going east. A left turn lane will also be built, and that will be prior to a building permit being issued for the second site. And then point C here gives the state and the county discretion. If at any time we determine that a left turn lane is needed, then they will be required at that time to build the left turn lane. It wouldn't have to wait until a building permit for the second venue. Yes, please.
You shall.
Oh my gosh, I thought we caught all those. Okay.
Okay, just
Which one, Commissioner Kraft?
item C. The applicant may, on the second line, it says shall.
Yes, I changed it from shall back to may.
Oh, there's a line to it? Okay, it doesn't show up here.
Okay, it's really hard to see. So, yeah, so it should read the applicant may be required.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay,
Thank-
and that, this
thank
is
you.
the discretionary point. Okay. So there's a kind of the blow-up of the site and the entrance into the property on the north side of Highway 36. Okay, so the applicant requested that we change the verbiage for the outdoor site to something called outdoor wedding ceremony site. And also reference outdoor wedding ceremony music. So this is an addition. This would be the site. We kind of fine-tuned this after a meeting with the sheriff and emails with Travis Harlow. Site lighting is provided in the parking areas and around the buildings and walkways. And I would point out that, well, as you see there, the lighting is to be directed on the property. It's not going to be a big light that's going to shine and disrupt the neighbors. There's one site, there's the other site. So one of the things that we did ask for was a blow-up of the parking plan. This would be it. I would point out that you can see a fire lane on each of these. Oops, the mouse doesn't want to play here. Hopefully you can see it there. It would be like around the front of each building, a fire lane. This is a standard condition we put on all our special use permits. It's an annual review. Hours of operation, this hasn't changed, so 9 in the morning till midnight. Alcohol is per state statutes. The emergency warning system, there has been discussion about, well, should they have to provide a storm shelter and everything? And we've had numerous conversations with Paul Johnson, our emergency management director, and he said that the venue has to have a system of evacuation. If their system is to get on the PA system and say there's a storm a-coming, we're going to lock the doors, everyone needs to leave, that is the system. They just have to have a system. If their other system is we're going to throw all you 500 people into the men's and ladies' rooms, that's fine. That's their system. So they just need to have a system of evacuation posted. It's like when you go to a hotel. If you look at the back of the hotel room, it'll tell you where you're supposed to go in case of a fire. Very similar. The existing road into the property is not hard surface. It's a gravel road, and that's okay. Each building will be limited to 10,000 square feet. Site 2, we will work with the applicant when they come in for a building permit for the second site to come up with a like a tree plan. And I would point out, and you probably know this, that Kent is a certified arborist. Yes. So there's a good resource there. The venue access road and Highway 36 intersection shall be lighted per state standards, and the applicants will pay 100% of that cost. There was discussion in the past about we don't want people coming to and leaving the site going through the drive for the house that's there. Well, as you will see here, there's already a gate there. So, but we did keep that verbiage. This we crossed out because we took care of it in the previous condition. Again, at the outdoor site, only outdoor wedding ceremonies can take place there. No ceremonies after 9 p.m. And the use of the ceremony site shall be tied to the use of one of the existing venues. So you would not have 3 separate activities. You would have 2. And I would point out the parking on the outdoor venue is limited to, I believe, 5 plus as required by handicap spaces. So that in itself will limit the number of people that are there. In a way, I guess people could walk. But so there's the outdoor venue. The lake would be just off to your right-hand side. Parking spaces, here we go, shall be handicap spaces per code plus 5 additional. There it is again. Should this special use permit move forward, staff will request that the NRD look at the possibility of a flashing light at the intersection. We kind of talked about, well, this lighting in the parking area, but also lighting along the internal drives. It shall be lighting, again, directional lighting, not lighting up the whole neighborhood. This is kind of like the landscape parkway to the property. This is a big one. As you could see by this previous picture, that's maybe a one lane, maybe 1.5 lane. Our zoning and subdivision regulations specify a 25-foot driving surface, and so they will be required to expand the driving surface and rock it so that you have a 25 feet. That does not include the shoulder. So this one, let's go to the picture here. So one of our concerns has been that from the edge of the paving, the right-of-way, all the way to the gate needs to be hard surfaced, and so this condition addresses that. The private drive shall be hard surfaced from the edge of the highway pavement to the gate, and that will be done prior to a certificate of occupancy issued for Site 1. So you have two things happening before the county will issue a certificate of occupancy for the first site. The right turn lane will be installed to DOT standards, and then the entrance from the existing paving to the gate will be hard surfaced. And this verbiage was worked out with Tim Leander from the state. I believe this is the last condition. At the entrance to the property, here will be only 2 lanes. So if you're leaving the venue and you want to turn right, but the guy in front of you wants to turn left, you're not going to be able to just go to the right of him and out. You're going to have to wait till he turns left and goes. You get up to the intersection, you turn right and go. And that's for safety concerns. So with that, Commissioners, I am done.
Okay, Doug, you do have a question from Commissioner Boyle.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, Doug, I wanted to ask you, I'm glad you left that slide up. When you talked about the emergency, and they say, you need to leave or something, or people decide to leave, is that where they all come out?
Yes.
So how many guests, how many vehicles are there? Several hundred?
I suspect if both venues are in operation, yes.
Okay, well, just what you just said about if somebody's going left or whatever, somebody can't go right or whatever, they're going right so you can't go left. That exit doesn't seem adequate to me, and I wonder whether the least could be done is that gated exit be open for emergency purposes. Something, I just can't see that happening, but I defer to the sheriff and captain. But I just am concerned about that. It doesn't seem like a very good exit plan. It seems like people would be stuck in their cars. That's just one thing. I mean, if you've gone to, I know you have, if you've gone to games over at the arena and stuff, I've been stuck in there trying to get out, and they finally put a traffic light up. But anyway, I'm not complaining about good parking, but anyway, was difficult to get out.
Okay.
And so anyway, I don't want to see that happen, particularly if they're leaving when there's an emergency. And I think people would probably jump in their cars and try to get out of there, The other thing, I don't know if you've driven by, it's kind of in my neighborhood a little bit, but 42nd and Leavenworth, where they tore down the old auto shop, UNMC is just gone hog wild, and it looks great. They've brought in trees that are about the size of the ones that are on this photo, and it's just a full-grown forest there now. It's amazing, and obviously that's very expensive. The trees that are supposed to be sheltering the homes from the property need to be pretty good-sized trees, evergreens that are something that really does the shielding. So I just mentioned that. I don't think you can plant some 4-foot evergreens or 4-foot trees, that are 20 centimeters or 20 inches and whatever. Anyway, I suggest that if it has to be a serious effort to block it off.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Doug?
And I would like to know about that emergency exit with the gate. I think they're going to have to do something about that.
That's a good, excellent point.
Okay. So with that, again, this is a continuation of a public hearing. If you commented 2 weeks ago, you're free to comment now. I will ask you to be brief since you already commented. If you haven't, you'll have the full allotted time. I'll ask anybody that's proponent for it to come first, and then the opponents will have the opportunity. Please come.
Good afternoon, good morning, I'm sorry. Martin Pelster, 2120 South 72nd Street, suite number 1200, Omaha, Nebraska. I represent the applicant. On a housekeeping matter, first of all, we did submit this application on behalf of the property owner, Curtis Corporation. My client, Linda Welcher, is purchasing the property under her corporation, Ida Inc. I would ask that any resolution be that is approving this application be, reflect that at the closing of the transaction that the special use permit can be transferred from Curtis Corporation to the buyer of the property, just to make sure that it is in the proper name. And so that's just a housekeeping matter. But initially, since the last meeting, we've taken the action that we thought was requested by the board, and that is to work with Doug Cook and the planning director's office to come up with a better site plan to show emergency vehicles can access the site easily, and to approve and revise or clarify some of the conditions that Mr. Cook just went over. The applicant is okay with the conditions as expressed or as listed by Mr. Cook and all the changes that have been made. I also talked with Paul Johnson, the Douglas County Emergency Management, with the Douglas County Emergency Management Agency, and talked to him about the emergency conditions and how to come up with a plan. I also spoke with Travis Harlow by telephone. He's the Waterloo Fire Department chief, and talked to him about any concerns he has and any fire and rescue issues that he may be concerned with. My client, Doug Cook, and I met with Sheriff Dunning and two deputies to talk about their issues. Now, with respect to Mr. Johnson's comments, he told me we need to provide a quote, system of notification, end quote. So he says system of notification. He says we need to have a system where we can notify the people that there is an emergency weather condition approaching. So we will have that system in place, and we will have loudspeakers that we can announce the emergency event that's approaching. With all the technology that we have, we're confident that we can get those emergency notifications out early and hopefully get people to leave if they want to leave. Now that's where Mr. Cook told me, once you provide that notification, that's all you're required to do. Now we do want to have a plan in place, and our plan would be that we provide this notification as early as possible. We give the guests the right to leave if they want to leave, and tell them that, look, you can leave if you want to, but if you're not going to leave, you need to come inside. They would be directed to go inside and go into an interior space where there's no windows. When we develop the site, when we develop the venues, we will take that into consideration and hopefully develop and plan our space accordingly. Mr. Harlow's comments with the chief of police told me that he has three concerns. One, provide for adequate ingress and egress for emergency vehicles. The plans that we've developed and shown, Mr. Cook showed, provide for that. We need to provide adequate lighting. We've done that. We need to follow the state fire marshal requirements. We will do that when we go to the permitting process, when we develop our plans. So, and then when we talk to Sheriff Dunning, his comments mainly centered around safety coming in and out of the facility. There were some concerns regarding visibility of the entryway. We're going to address some issues there, remove some trees, and work with the state to get some trees out of there. Security was another issue. We worked with Sheriff Dunning to make sure that we have adequate security on the site, and we told him what our security plans are. Now, you have received a letter from the parties opposing, the attorneys that represent the parties opposing this application. Many of those are rehashing comments that were made at the last meeting. They bring up the issue of whether this complies with the comprehensive plan. We think it does. The county attorney has indicated that it does at the planning commission meetings. The plans, the procedural issues regarding having two different applications, not a big issue. Everybody's had the right to be heard, and the plans are different. One comment they made in their letter is that the rights of the neighbors, their property rights, are superior to the rights of the applicant. I think that's a dangerous statement to make. These are property rights. One property owner is not superior to the other. You should take the consideration of the property owners both into consideration when you're looking at this application, particularly when it comes to economic loss, because our client property will be worth less without this application. So,
thank you. Any other proponents? Again, any other proponents? Okay, any opponents?
Good morning. Tom Ackley, Coley Justin Law Firm, 1125 South 103rd Street, Omaha, Nebraska. Here on behalf of Lynn and Debbie Planbeck, 13515 North 248th Street. Again, the comments we had made at our last meeting here, August 20th, is with an SUP to have as much specificity as you can in the requirements so that, again, you've got the ability to enforce the SUP. I think there has been some progress made since the August 20th meeting. As Mr. Cook outlined, you've gone from 17 SUP requirements to 20, but I would like to highlight, and I hope you all have my letter I submitted yesterday. I believe Dan got that into the record. We had requested some additional SUP items, which again, I want to highlight some of those for you. You know, the adequate turnaround, which is reflected in the site plan. If the site plan approval becomes part of the permanent record, then I think that's covered, which I had asked to be in item 21 of my requirements. Another item which we had requested was on-site security. Again, I think Mr. Pelster just mentioned that they worked with the sheriff's office to address security, but there's nothing of record that says what that security would be. So again, if you have an SUP requirement regarding security, and I believe the discussion here at your August 20th meeting was whether or not you would require security if alcohol was served or not. Again, there's nothing in the SUP with regard to that. Item 23 in my letter, request for specific landscaping and berms. Again, Mr. Boyle, I believe, just brought up one of the SUP requirements is to plant trees, but there's no specificity as to what kind of caliper you would have. Would you be putting those on berms with landscaping? Most times when you have an SUP or a conditional use permit, you'll see specific landscape plans that are adopted as part of that, and there's nothing with regard to specificity on that matter. Other items we've requested, restrict the use of fireworks on site. That was in our previous letter, and again, today we'd request that. Again, hopefully an easy item if the applicant doesn't intend to do that, because that would definitely contribute to noise in the neighborhood. The dust concerns, Mr. Cook highlighted again, there are no requirements for hard surface road, just dirt road. Again, similar to other venues where you're going to have a large number of traffic, doing dust mitigation measures when you're going to have a large crowd coming in would be requested, and again, to be an SUP requirement. Avoiding risk of fire in grassy areas. Again, we've got a large grassland area potentially, and limiting smoking where that can be should be a natural, which again, if you put it in the SUP, it becomes a requirement. And finally, we also ask that guns would be prohibited on site, which again, any owner of a business can make that a requirement for their property, and we would ask that that be requested and put in as part of the SUP. Again, we oppose the application, but to the extent you desire to bring this forward and continue it, we would ask that you have more specificity in the special use permit for the items that I've requested. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Simpson, 17838 Burke Street. I represent, as you may recall, I represent Dale and Joe Jones. They represent 20 acres of the west side of the property that butts this applicant's property. And I did also submit a letter yesterday. I'm sure Mr. Esch gave that to you for the record. I spoke last time. I won't rehash those arguments because you do have my letter. But again, we have some issues where we disagree whether or not it complies with the zoning regulations in the comp plan. Some of the procedural issues I'll address at the end of my presentation. But I did want to focus a little bit because I think our discussion on August 20th talked about some of the economic loss issues associated with the special use permit. And I thought I made it clear in my letter, but I would just like to address it again. There was evidence submitted at, I think, the second or third Planning Commission hearing from real estate professionals that my client's property would suffer economic loss if this use was put into place. The representations that were made in the August 20th hearing before you folks were that the second Planning Commission hearing, Planning Commission voted for denial of the special use permit based on noise pollution. I quoted for you the actual resolution of that denial, and it wasn't just based on noise pollution. The Planning Commission at that time did find that there would be economic loss to my client's property. So I just want to be clear on that. As far as our position, my clients still strongly object to this special use permit for all the reasons set forth in my letter and my presentation on August 20th. I do agree with Mr. Ackley. We had a long discussion on August 20th about some of the specificity of the requirements of this permit should this board choose to pass that permit. I won't go back over the ones Mr. Ackley addressed, but number 17 in my letter, you'll note, I don't really know what we do with that. It says staff will request NDOT to look at feasibility of installation of flashing lights at Highway 36 intersection. So what happens then? Will staff come back to you and say, NDOT says, yes, they can put in flashing lights. Is the applicant going to pay for those? How do we know when that gets resolved? So I guess I would just like that addressed if the special use permit does go forward. I think we talked on August 20th about the applicant agreeing to having on-site security staff. Again, I'm not totally clear on that, but Mr. Ackley addressed that, and I do agree. I think that was something that we pinned down that's not in those requirements that Mr. Cook showed on the screen previous to. The notice, I know the notice was probably given pursuant to law, but I think it was Mr. Rogers that said, please give these folks ample notice so they can have time to take off work and be here today. We've had, this is our 5th public hearing on this matter. Previous 4, we've had residents lined up to participate in this process. I got notice that this was going to be on our agenda today by looking on your website. We have 2 people here today. So again, maybe it's in accordance with law, but it is unfortunate. For all those reasons, we do request that you deny the special use permit, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just know for the record, 2 weeks ago, we informed everyone that we were going to bring this back up then, so I feel that there was adequate notice on that, so, ma'am.
My name is Debbie Planbeck. I live at 13515 North 240th Street. Our property is adjacent on the west side of the subs permit person applying for the sub. I'd rather not be up here, but I feel like this is a last-ditch effort, although the die has been cut. We've lived and farmed and been a part of this community since 1972. We first moved to this area. We rented our farmhouse for $85 a month and raised pigs until we saved enough money to buy our first house in this area where we lived for 32 years. Our dream was to live on the bluff looking over the Elkhorn River Valley. When Black Hawk Estates was developed, we purchased our 10-acre lot in 2006 and moved to our home in 2007. I've traveled quite a bit, but there's no place I'd rather be than at my own home overlooking the Elkhorn River Valley. We subsequently bought 3 lots adjacent that are contiguous to the Curtis property. I could be wrong, but I don't believe Douglas County allows for 10-acre residential plots anymore. That is my understanding. So our lots are our farmer 401k. They're a rare commodity in Douglas County. We live in the country because we appreciate the tranquility and the open spaces. I think last meeting, the point about the barking dog was missed. We don't mind the barking dog half a mile away. It's just that noise travels. The noise study and the traffic study were addressed at the April 10th meeting when the request was denied. It's interesting how the request was then passed at the next meeting. The following are minutes from the Planning Commission meeting when the permit was denied. The move was made April 10th. I move this request be denied as the neighbors may sustain a financial loss on their property investment property rights with a commercial activity in this residential area. The proposal would impact the residential employment of their property, and there are public health concerns regarding noise, sound pollution, traffic impacts, and traffic in general. It was denied 6-3. Supposedly, the only thing that changed was they moved one venue a little bit. One other question that has never been asked or answered is if this passes, what happens to the remaining 160 acres. Is this also going to be reapplied for, and then who knows what goes on? Also, if I were the applicant, I would be pleading my case, talking to the people being affected most, and pleading my case to the opposition, to the Planning Commission, and to you, the board. So far, I have heard from no one but their lawyer, Mr. Pelster. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
Good morning, Joanne Jones, 13401 North 240th Street, Valley. My husband and I, Dale, we live west of the property that she's to purchase. I'm a bit nervous, had a late night, flew in at midnight, and didn't have time to write my agenda down for today, so I apologize. This is, I believe, the 6th meeting we've had now. The first one was an informal meeting at the Ponderosa, which we received a letter to attend at 4:30 in the afternoon. And at that time, they had the same billboard with their nice pictures that they got off the internet of what their wedding venue would look like. And a lot of us neighbors asked several questions, the safety issues, the loudness, the alcohol. And the only time I've heard Linda Welcher get up and speak is when she informed us that she has been engaged for 20 years and this is the wedding venue she wants to get married at. Have not heard from her since. We've been pleading our hearts out to the planning committee, to you people twice now. We love our property. I think her wedding venue would be a great thing, but just not where it's going to be placed. Also, at the last meeting in August, the opponents brought up, you need to go check out the fountains. That's a beautiful place. My husband and I drove out there. You cannot compare that fountains wedding venue to what Ms. Welcher is going to have. That venue is off a county road that's 55 miles an hour, turns off to a gravel road that's 35 miles an hour. Nobody's affected. We're on the busiest highway. Highway 36 keeps getting busier and busier. I know you guys have tried to do your traffic studies and you're bringing up the safety issues, but I still have a huge concern about the safety of the community. And I thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Any other opponents? With that, we will close the public hearing. What's the will of the board?
Second it.
There's a
deny.
motion by Commissioner Boyle to deny, a second by Commissioner Morgan. Commissioner Borges.
I'm actually in support of this after the work that I feel the applicant has done in the due diligence that's been done in addressing the concerns that were raised. And again, the special use permit, that's a vehicle for us to be able to use as a county, that if those conditions aren't followed, that permit can be stripped. We give it, we can take it away. And so I really do feel that the effort that the applicant has put into trying to take care of the issues that the folks have brought up have been brought up. I don't think that we're going to be able to build a special use permit to make it 100% foolproof of everything. But the reason you have this is that there's annual, like the neighbors can call the county at any time throughout that period and say they're not following this, they're not following this, and the county looks into it. At the end of the time, if there's more conditions to be added to the special use permit, then we can talk about those special conditions at that time. But I really do feel that for, again, you all even said, for the number of meetings, the number of discussions, the number of bodies that you've been before, and again, law enforcement, emergency management, State Department, county departments, I really think that the applicant is trying to address all of the conditions or the issues in which were brought forth for them to address. And so I'm not going to support the motion to deny. I'm actually hopeful that that fails and that we can approve the special use permit.
Commissioner Brooks and Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, and I agree with Mary Ann. I just got back from a 12-day excursion to do 2 weddings, one in Wisconsin and one in Des Moines. And they were very similar in my interpretation of what I'm seeing presented to us. Here, the neighbors were a lot closer. The violin music was beautiful, that was one. The other one was really right in a neighborhood that had developed around them. The gardens were beautiful. They treated it, and they treated their neighbors with a lot of respect. I did not get an opportunity to talk to the neighbors, but during this wedding, one of them was out there cooking something that smelled delicious. And nothing that took place at this venue disrupted his cooking. And I would say he was just maybe, 60 feet away from where the violin was playing, where the wedding, 120 feet from where the wedding ceremony took place. So I have a feeling with the amount of money this person is putting in, they're going to be very responsible, and I do mean very responsible, operators and owners, because they could lose everything if we deny the next special use permit or call it up at any time, which is our option. And we will be getting yearly reviews.
Thank you, Commissioner Kraft. Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I drove out and got a look at it, and before this is over, I'd like the sheriff and captain to speak about the highway safety, but I think Ms. Jones and Ms. Planbeck made some excellent points, and I went to a wedding. I've gone to a lot of weddings, but one of the most recent was, and I don't even know where it was. I affectionately call it North France, but anyway, it was out someplace way north, and it was maybe around 74th Street or something. Absolutely incredible place, and they had a vineyard they were just cultivating. It kind of sat in a little bit of a hollow, and quite a bit of land, and really well maintained, and a really nice party facility, and they had a really nice patio made of wood that overlooked the water and so forth, and that's where champagne toast was. It couldn't have been a better wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. They had a canopy of trees, and I mean, the whole thing was perfect. And all including, it was a long wedding, and I was getting a little hungry, to tell you the truth, and so they had donuts, so I kind of ate some donuts. But anyway, the whole point of the whole thing is that as the music started, it was really loud. And but there weren't any neighbors around. I mean, this place was really secluded. And Ann really danced up a storm. I didn't with my bum leg. But, and all the people just had a blast with lights and all the thing, and it was loud, really loud. And I mean, it was fine. It worked out great because it didn't bother anybody. What I'm concerned about is that, with these special use permits, that the burden shifts to, Ms. Jones, Ms. Planbeck to complain. And I just can't see us with the investment that they make. I really can't see us, lifting that permit. I just don't see it happening. Now, I know we can enforce terms of it and so forth, but I think there needs to be more specificity that was brought up by legal counsel. I think we need to really get these flashing lights locked in. The state is not to be messed with. I mean, if they could be, that could be a lengthy process. I think security is an issue too. I think, I seriously think the value of the property will be diminished next door to the residents. I just don't see how that all works. And I've worked on a case before, I think I mentioned it, there's an area around 144th Street that had some kind of a cement process or a mill or something going on, and it filled up with houses all the way around it, and then the residents started complaining about the noise from the place that was there first, you know. Well, in this instance, the residents are there first, and they bought some lots, and I don't know about that, we'll have to ask about whether the 10 acres is permitted anymore. I think you may be right. But, and that is a great investment, obviously, for the future. But I really feel like, I guess the point I want to make is I think this diminishes the value of the homeowners, their property, their investment. And I think there's other places where this could go, where it could be accepted. And that's why I'm opposed to it.
Commissioner Morgan.
Well, I still have a concern concerning the safety, Highway 36, and I've been out there 3 different times, maybe 4, but that's really my concern. Coming out of there, the 90% that are going to be eastbound, and I assume they'll probably widen that exit so there's 2 lanes out onto Highway 36 where they can make a right turn to head west. And I'm afraid that someone could be blocked out in crossing. I know I go to Mount Michael quite often, my wife and I have a grandson there, and even crossing out there west of Elkhorn onto that highway is a little bit of a safety concern. So I find that to be just my major concern, is that safety on that Highway 36 and the people that'll be attending and trying to get out of there and make that turn to go east. So that's my big concern.
Commissioner Duda.
Thank you. Obviously a tough emotional issue. I did have the opportunity yesterday to go out and tour around the site. A little longer than I meant to. The gate wouldn't open to let me back out, so I got toured a couple of times. But what an absolutely gorgeous site. And I mean, this is a couple hundred acres we're talking about. When you get down by the lake, you look up and you see some treetops over there and say, okay, the neighbor's property is on the other side of those treetops, a quarter mile away. Where's the better place? If this is an okay idea, if we could just find a better place, you're not going to find a better place than this. This really is a beautiful site. Now, I don't mean to disregard, I recognize for a property owner, I mean, we've got something going on in my neighborhood that I'm very emotional about. I mean, because it may impact my farm, and we're not here to talk about that. But I understand the emotion that goes around wanting to protect your investment, your property. This is everything, and I want to be respectful of that. I mean, the Joneses, the Plambecks, they have a lot on the table here, and I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I think these guys are going to be good neighbors. I wouldn't mind having them next door to me. I can tell you that. I think for what they are putting in, I don't know what would be better outside of absolutely nothing. But this is just a beautiful property. The applicant is going to be their own buffer. They own more land than what is just in the application here. They are their own buffer in a lot of cases. I think it looks like a good venture. I believe they will be good neighbors, and I apologize to the neighbors. You can't make everybody happy, and I get that. But I personally would not have any qualms about living next door to this venture. I think it will be a good venture, and I think it will enhance the neighborhood myself. I truly believe that. Thank you.
With that, there is a motion to deny on the floor. Please vote.
Motion fails. Commissioners Morgan and Boyle voting yes, all other commissioners voting no.
There's a motion by Commissioner Kraft, second by Commissioner Borgensen to approve.
One moment, please. Okay, thank you.
Please vote.
Motion passes. Commissioners Morgan and Boyle voting no, other commissioners voting yes.
We'll go on to item 7, and this is the committee discussion and action. Letter A is the finance report. Item 1 is the budget report. Commissioner Morgan.
As presented.
As presented. We'll go back. Commissioner Boyle, I want to clarify something with you just to make sure. To your question, I got something to correct it, so under Child and Youth Services, I just want to mention it here. What was said to me is that the funding that was cut off to the JAG applied for it, and it was denied from a pre-group that the board appoints to make recommendations for CBA. So the service funded to the JAG is cut. It was put in, but I don't think anybody else applied for it, so that the money that was used for that is not out. What I can do, though, and we should do, is we can make a suggestion of the board's preference for that and go from there in the future. But just to correct it, it was CBA, the JAG applied, and it got reallocated somewhere else.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, let's go to the Human Resource Committee. Item 1 is the personnel report as submitted. There are no legislative items that I am aware of. Commissioner Boyle?
I'm deadly serious about sports gambling. I think we need to get our interest expressed to state senators, and I think we need to be serious. I don't know whether all of us support it. I really do. I think this is I think this is a real opportunity to reduce property taxes, and that's why I think. And if it comes directly to us, that would be the best. Wouldn't have to go down begging to get a couple of crumbs from the state. I think the sports gambling should be legalized. I think it should be legalized by congressional districts, so if 1 and 3 don't want it, have at it, but we do. And I think we need that income. It's legal, a mile and a half from here, and that's really in every direction. And I think we're really being so foolish. We have our head in the sand. So I really do I intend to bring that up to the legislature, and also the idea that the state takes over all criminal defense and criminal prosecution charges. And one or the other will help out a great deal.
I again support you on the idea.
Great, thank you.
Right. Commissioner Borgeson?
The other two I would think we need to look at is the language about shall, when they bring up an appeal here, a homestead exemption, and we shall instead of we may, or there's exceptions that we can look at, because I bet you if we went around this table, around this entire room, everybody would be able to come up with a time where they either missed a deadline or needed to ask for an exception because of a family emergency or whatever the case may be. And so whatever that language could be, I think that maybe we need to look at that so that we have a little bit more free will and be able to grant those instead of always looking like we're not accepting the wonderful county attorney's opinion. And then the other is, I think a while back, we passed a resolution that, it might have been back in '08 or even before that, about unfunded mandates. And I think we need to bring that back up, repass it, and start making a little bit more noise than what we have on this. And shifts. It's unfunded mandates that are passed, but it's also these shifts that are occurring that are really killing us. And when it comes to, again, the perfect example of what we talked about today during our budget and setting of our mill levy, we need to be talking about it all the time and way before that, because it's such a complicated issue. So, again, that would be another legislative item that I would ask Marcos to go back and look to see what we actually passed at one time, or if we did, and if not, let's work together to prepare that so I can bring it to the board. And then lastly, on legislation, I think it's imperative that we begin now. It doesn't have to be in big groups, but I think we need to have conversations with our senators, which I have had, but I think it needs to be more formalized, with what these shifts are doing, what they are, so that they totally understand. We have seen the effects of term limits, and what I mean by that is we have lost constitutional knowledge and expertise of them understanding not only the state system, but the local system over time. And by the time that they get the state system done, they don't have time to learn the local system, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to leave as their legacy as a senator, and we're left in the dust. And so just that part, we have to be able to go back and create that partnership with the state rather than this we against them mentality that is occurring right now. So I'd like to also maybe sit down with the chair and Marcos and talk about how we can better formulate that to occur.
Do we want Marcos to try to work with the lobbying firm for that Douglas County Senators meeting that we've had?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
That's one of
we
them.
can work on that date. And do we have a tri-county date set?
Mhm.
We do?
It's January.
No, I mean that's the breakfast,
Oh.
I haven't seen it. Oh, is that set? Can you follow up on that and see who's hosting it this year?
I think it's our turn, isn't it?
It's our turn? Can you verify that? Because if that's the case, we better.
I'll figure out, yeah.
Okay, because if that's the case, we better get on that quick.
I think it's our turn.
Okay. Commissioner Boyle.
I want to mention that some time ago when Governor Ricketts was a candidate, I was at a county meeting and he walked in and I knew I was visiting with his campaign person who I knew pretty well. And so he came over and we greeted each other and said hello. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you want to really hit this crowd with a positive message, I said, I urge you to talk about renewing a partnership, starting to treat us as friendly people. And I watched the response. Anyway, he did. And the crowd was up on its feet. I looked at his face and he was stunned. Well, he hasn't done that, but he was quite surprised. And he came back and said, boy, you were right. And I said, we need to be able to talk to you. And anyway, then I did call I saw the governor over the holidays and I spoke to him and I asked him, I said, I'd like to be able to talk to someone on your staff about what county government is doing and what our funding is and so forth. So he gave me his card and he gave me the name of the person to talk to, and then events in my life prevented me from following up on that, but I'd like to follow up on that. I think where we really need to head for is the governor's budget person, and at some point maybe even the governor himself. I know he's busy, but they just don't understand what we do. They haven't got a clue about how important county government is and what our functions are. So anyway, I'd like to see that. One other bizarre thing, and the day wouldn't be complete if I didn't bring up something bizarre. Marcos has been helping me with something kind of unusual, and that is the license plates on government vehicles, and particularly law enforcement. If you go to Missouri, when you're in St. Joe, the plate just says police on the car. That's it, police. They never have to change them. You don't have all these ridiculous numbers that don't mean anything. And also, they've got them on other public buses. The other thing that fascinates me, and I don't know how this happens, but postal vehicles, which I believe are leased, they're private vehicles, and I think they're leased, they have no license plates, and they just have a number on the back, you know. Well, why can't we do that? I mean, think of all the plates that are wasted. Think of all the time and energy putting plates on cars, on cop cars and sheriff's vehicles and all this, emergency trucks and buses and all this. It is really something we ought to look into. We could save a lot of money on the plates, and if you want to just have, you know, sheriff or city of Omaha or Douglas County for a plate, you might even be able to get away with no plate at all and just have that on the back of the vehicle. I don't know, and maybe a vehicle number, you know. But anyway, I think it's something we ought to look into because, you know, Marcos is a big supporter of this. No, but anyway, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think I want to pursue that. It sounds, it's a little bizarre, but what the hell?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Commissioner Borges.
The other thing, the other reason I think it's important that we have our conversations with our senators is just because of the way they're set up at the state level. A lot of times, things that occur, and you brought one up today, Commissioner Boyle, the administration can make a decision on reducing or cutting something without the senators really even knowing or understanding what that means. And so again, it's important that there's not really a checks and balance even in that regard because they can't call. I've actually had HHS administration refuse to give information to a senator. That's ridiculous. But we can be that voice and that give them the message about what's happening to us. And again, sometimes it isn't what happens in the legislature, it's what happens during different department and administrative decisions where they're made. So another good one is our detox. So I think, again, those two issues right there would warrant a good conversation with some of our senators.
Commissioner Boyle.
You know what I'd like to do? While you talk about that, it dawned on me that we need to communicate a lot more with our senators and probably on a regular basis. This may be something for Leah to work on, you know, to send an email monthly that something may be headed, this is happening in Douglas County, and then talk about what it is, the detox and what we took over, talk about our costs, talk about some other things. Not a big, long thing, just a couple of little shots at what's happening and what it's costing or something, you know, and how many prisoners we have and how many are coming from the state and all that kind of thing. So anyway, and then the one other thing I want to mention is important to me. This September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm going to bring a resolution for us to look at the work that's going in to prevent cancer. But something like 47 children a day are diagnosed under the age of 12 are diagnosed with cancer. And so I think it's pretty important, and the kind of research and development for children is just not there. There have only been like 4 new medications to treat them in the last 10 years. So it's an important subject, and I think it's something that we ought to look into. I saw on television a couple days ago 4 mothers talking, 2 of whom lost their children to cancer at a very young age. It was just tragic. So anyway, I'll bring back a resolution and see what you think.
Okay. With that, lastly, the clerk, and then we'll go.
Thank you. Commissioner Borgeson, Ellen found a resolution from 2012 about unfunded mandates. We'll share that with you and Marcos to see if that's what you were referencing. So.
Okay. With that, we do have need for executive session. I have 2 items, labor and personnel. Okay. We reserve the right to enter into executive session in order to protect the public's interest with respect to discussion regarding labor negotiations and personnel. Is there a motion by the board? Okay. We're adding to that labor negotiations, litigation, and personnel. Is there a motion by the board?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Morgan, second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
So, the president just